Thanks, Darin, for being part of the for being part of the EdTech Mentor today. I'm really excited to announce our partnership through this EdTech Mentor conversation, and I would like to start before we go into the details of the partnership and how can we benefit companies. I don't know how companies can benefit from our combined offering. I would like to start with your background, Harbinger Lane, and your story.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. And glad to be doing this. I basically have spent the last 20 plus years in the ed tech space, both working for large and small companies in a sales capacity in both higher ed and K-12. Um, Large companies like Cengage, Blackboard, small companies that most people haven't heard of, but like Cialfo and um, maybe Moodle Rooms was a company that Blackboard acquired years ago. Um, but in that time, I developed a really um, I developed a passion for the education space in the U.S. and Canada, just from my network and growing that network over time with a lot of the leadership at the institutions that I was serving, and um, at a certain point, it just clicked that because of a lot of the relationships I was developing with different types of companies, that I could go out on my own and start to work more directly for a lot of different companies and bring them into the market, help them understand what it's going to take to be successful and scale their business in either higher ed or K-12, and even now more so in the workforce space as well. So I've spent lot of my um, a lot of my adult life just sort of spent immersed in this space, and just really felt like going from being an individual contributor to managing teams to building teams to working on go to market strategy, that that would be something I could just turn into a separate business. And I did a couple years ago. And you know at any one time I was juggling 3 to 7 different clients that I was working with at a time, and building out a team that would support them. Um, and So yeah, it's been going great, and looking forward to expanding with you guys in 2025.
That's a great introduction because it touches on what's important about this partnership, and it is that from 2070, of course, we are a marketing agency, B2B agency. So it's always that what comes before marketing and what comes after marketing, right? Because it's you gotta look at the market opportunity. You gotta look at how you define those things clearly, your buyer personas, your verticals, your like being very specific about the marketing opportunity because that's what drives good marketing, right? That's
Right.
before marketing, but also after that, because if you're able to generate demand, if you're able to have the right memory structures in your in your audiences, then the next step comes, which is how do how do you go about sales? How do you make this great marketing uh, revenue? How do you transform these great audiences, these great campaigns into actual revenue? And I think that's where our partnership brings great value to the edtech world in being very thorough and actually thinking holistically about the market, um, the revenue, and everything between between those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. I found myself when I reached out to you guys to have a conversation, it was after having multiple scenarios um, where I could see some of my clients were were at a point where the only way to scale was gonna, yeah, you can hire a huge sales team, but you've really got to, especially in the U.S. market, you've really got to differentiate your brand. You've got to do things that are really warming the market, and not just the market, right? There is no just higher ed market or just K-12 market. There's, such discrete um, sub sub markets, right? That exist, um, and really having to kind of build campaigns. I found myself in a situation where we were starting to build campaigns for clients, and then we just couldn't scale that ourselves. And so that's when I came to you and said, "Hey, let's find a way to take your expertise in the ed tech marketing space, and then ours that's really more about, the sales and revenue side of things. Let's bring them together and try and help more of our client base together."
And that those nuances and those things, those specificities of the edtech, you mentioned that, like, of the higher education space, on the K-12 space, on the corporate learning or the skills development, those are very specific. And at some point in our early discussions, we thought it would be a great idea to do an immersion of each of those markets. And that's an idea that we can develop, that I'm sure we can develop later. But yeah, but to your point, it is usually a blind spot. It is usually a pitfall a to think about the higher education market, right? I mean, it's complex, it's regional. If you're talking about the even the public sector or the private sector, that's completely different. And of course, is something that Harbinger Lane and 270 combined, again, can we can have a playbook, we can have a path to revenue that avoids all of those common mistakes. And on that note, we think it's a good idea to go through at least the stages of companies that we've helped and that we can now help together, and yeah, and address some of the challenges and some of those blind spots as well. So, Darin, can you give us your understanding of the different types of clients that you serve today, and we'll draw a parallel with 2070 as well?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if I just look back over this last 2 year period, definitely working in the startup space, and I love the startup space. You know, so finding solutions for them is really a passion of mine. But you've got to be, very resourceful. Um, I would segment startups into sort of startups and then scale ups, right? Because there are many companies that sort of fall into, we've already kind of found product market fit, but we're really young. Maybe we've got 10 to 20 employees, maybe more, and we're really starting to get to the point where we need to scale, and we're building the capacity and the team to scale. That size, that type of an organization often needs extra support just to assure that they're right on the right track. Maybe actually help them with some strategies, especially when you're, you know, especially from like a thought leadership perspective, trying to help those companies connect to thought leaders in the space and start to grow their business. And then larger companies that are more established. Hard to put a size to that, but I would just say more established, larger companies that have been around for, you know, 10 plus years that I could think of. Um, they've got established brands, uh, but they're also trying to find ways to maybe it's a new product that they've developed and it has a slightly new audience that they have to go after, or maybe it's a refinement of their sales strategy. Uh, I often, as a salesperson or as a sales manager, would be in an organization where we had hired a profile of salespeople to meet the need at the time, but as we grew, we started to realize that we needed to level up, and that meant that those salespeople either needed to level themselves up, or we needed to start to find a new, uh, you know, set of leaders in the sales space that could sell at a C level, at senior levels within institutions, and so or within systems or states, so those larger companies have, I think, discrete needs as well that we're finding ways to add value to them as well. So I
Great.
think those three areas, right?
Right, right, and it's basically the same with marketing capabilities in like when we're talking about how 27 works and the type of clients. It's basically the same. There's only a maybe a difference there, and I'll touch on the challenges, but it's that there are US based companies or North America based companies looking for support with their North America go to market. But there are also US companies, in our case, or Canada based companies looking for support in Latin America, which is a very interesting market. And also we can talk about that in another moment. But yeah, that's maybe the only difference. The challenges. So I would say for the startup companies, it is usually on the side of the essentials of the brand, where we have become very good at helping those startups, those lean startups, be very smart about what are those essential components or elements of their brand that they need to improve to be competitive, to be taken seriously sometimes, right? It's even like that, and that's usually the challenge with the startups, with the startup companies. With the scale ups, in our case, it's more about air coverage, like covering a lot of channels. That's a reality today. You need to be in different social media platforms. You need to have a cadence. You need to be present. You need to build that mental availability of your brand. And to mention yeah, we can also go into that at some point. But it's being on that short list of companies that whenever a buying situation presents, you're there. So that's usually that second case. And the last one, with established companies, is about most of the time it's about community engagement, or what we call engagement marketing. So it's actually putting your brand at the center of interactions, which is not as trivial as one could think, but also essential in the edtech world or in the education world, because there are
Yeah.
certain values, there are certain communities that whenever those established companies find the key to be present in those situations, the return of investment is immense. So, but it's basically the same company. So, Darin, can we start with those startups? And I'm particularly interested in those costly mistakes, right? Like, what are those typical, blind spots for startups looking to sell into the education world?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in my experience, the startup founders, the one thing that I do with almost every startup founder that I start a conversation with is I really try and test their desire to enter into the education space and sell B2B. Because if they have another alternative path, and I can think of several that have chosen an alternative path, maybe going directly to students or something else, um, you know, that's just the right thing for them, and that's great. Like I think they need to understand what they're getting into in terms of when you're dealing with larger, effectively government organizations, right? If they're public sector, and even if they're private sector, they can be fairly large and bureaucratic, and um, so it's not necessarily going to be, that you're going to develop massive market share in your first year. And so I try and help people level set on based on what they're trying to sell into let's say higher ed, right? Um, a new founder come into the higher ed space, has done some beta work with, let's say, regional public universities and had some really good success. Well, I want them to understand what it's going to take them to private institutions or community college or more elite institutions, either public or private, and the fact that in some cases their product it's going to be a really lengthy time horizon to get deals done for certain things. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to help people understand help them level set so that they can create a business plan that makes the most sense. Where are the opportunities that they can go make money quickly and start to prove out their product market fit? That's really what everybody's goal is. And they need, 5, 10 clients to make that happen. And so I guess I would, in reflecting on it, if I think about the true startup role that I've taken, it's been as advisor, right? It's really been, and I try and do that in an economical way for a new startup where you don't have to commit for a long period of time. We just do maybe like a month-long engagement, meet once a week, see how that goes. And if you want to keep doing it, great. But a lot of it is advising, trying to enter the market and do it the right way. A lot of the advising also helps them from a planning perspective when they're raising money, because they need to sort of think through, what does my team need to look like? And, based on the type of sale that I'm going to be doing, what types of resources do I need? Do I need a solutions engineer, or do I need a customer success team right away because it's going to be fairly intensive support while we're getting going. So I think that's sort of to me, the dynamic that I see mostly in startups is more advising in that space. And I love that part of it. I think it's a ton of fun to experience that with these people and help them think through their efforts to get product market fit.
I would love to expand on that, on the product market fit. So can you give us an example or just a description of what product market fit entails?
Yeah. I mean, it what it usually starts out as with the startups for me has been I get them in front of I help them think through who is really their ideal buyer at the institution. And it's confusing, right? If you're dealing with even just a regional public university or a large, say, school district, your buyer isn't always clear, and you think, oh, I'm just going to go to the superintendent, or I'm going to go to the chancellor, or I'm going to go to the president or the provost. And maybe, right? Maybe we go in and we set a meeting or two like that so that you can get a feel for your value proposition in that context, right? But I first help them think through that, like, who is that ideal target? And I stress test it for them, and I help them have a few meetings potentially, right? So that we can come away from those meetings and say, okay, great. So what do you think would need to happen in order for this institution to buy now, right? and that opens up a whole series of new questions, right? Like, did we really understand, you know, their needs, or did they just like what we had to say, right? Because a lot of times, you know, what you're presenting is really compelling. If you're a startup and you've gotten, you know, an idea of what this is going to do, and you've built out sort of maybe your beta or whatever, you're pretty passionate about it. You tell a compelling story, and they're going to be like, yes, this is great. Yes, this is great does not mean I have a need, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It just means, wow, it's really exciting to hear that somebody did that. Like, you know, and so helping, helping somebody through the process of initial interest to identifying a need, to mapping that need to an initiative uh, which has funding, right?
Right, right.
To then helping them think through, you know, is this a, and the other piece to it is that when you talk about product market fit and you're trying to get that, all I'm doing with them initially is helping them get that first sale, right? Or those first few sales so that they can kind of see what it took. The, the real, the real work of product market fit, if you had all the time and all the money in the world to really do it, you'd go out and survey a host of potential clients in different segments of, say, the higher ed market, and you'd, in that level of work, would start to bring back to you, oh, here's how we meet needs in community colleges. Here's how we meet needs in, you know, trade schools. Here's how we meet needs in, you know, medium-sized four-year institutions, and so on. And you'll see that it's slightly different, and that your buyer is slightly different, right? And so, and often has been the case, we will find out, oh, this does not apply at all in community colleges, right? Or, oh, large elite institutions do all this kind of work on their own already, and they'll never buy from you, right?
Right,
Or
right.
whatever the scenario is. But we help them kind of narrow down a set of potential clients that
Yeah,
they,
and it's right, and it's narrowing, not in the sense of reducing, but in the sense of getting those early adopters faster and getting that initial traction and validation faster, which is key. And sometimes, yeah, sometimes startups die because of that, because the lack of those first successful moments. But also, there's another key point that ties perfectly to our brand essentials philosophy, and it is that you might be very charismatic, you might be hitting the right notes with people, right? And a product that you have maybe has a big dream behind it, but if it doesn't resonate with the day-to-day of institutions and with their needs and with their concerns, and if you're not telling the right story from a from a perspective of a brand like that,
right,
it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. The product will not matter. The creative and the money that you put behind your messaging or your visuals, that won't matter. The resources you can assign to sales or to your go-to-market won't matter, right? So what I really like about your approach, and again that ties perfectly with the brand essentials philosophy, is that it's early validation, and it's a positive feedback loop, because all of those things that you're going to find out with those early adopters and with those early with the access to those buyer personas that you're helping startups to get, will inform marketing, will inform brand, of course, and will inform the resources and the way that you're positioning yourself to be successful in those particular segments. So I think it's a great example for that stage, for the startup stage group of companies.
yeah, yeah, I agree with you. It's and I like the brand essentials component to this, because it's not directly in my wheelhouse. So I like the fact that we would take this concept together to a lot of these startups. But I think you're right. It's all in service of sort of early validation, and um, and really what I tell founders is all this work that we're doing is in service of helping you sort of slow down to speed up later, right?
Right,
I know you
right.
want to run really fast right now and you just want to go get that first deal, but like all we're trying to do, we're not pausing this train for long. We're just trying to help you get enough data early so that now you know, oh, I know exactly where my V1 prospective client is and what they look like and who that buyer is and where their budgets are, and I know how to talk to them now. And that means I can start to message properly. That means I can really focus in what is otherwise, especially the US, these markets are so massive that you've got to really focus, especially early.
Exactly. Exactly. We were in an earlier conversation, Darin, we were talking about the California, the state of California education system, and if you were to compare that, the size of that with any of the big countries, it would be, I mean, it's massive. To your point, and what I'm and it's something common that I've seen now that you're talking about that product market fit and that early validation. It's sometimes founders get blinded by early success with the wrong segment. And they'll point all of their resources because it's just anecdotal that they were successful with a particular institution in a particular situation and in a particular context, and they'll extrapolate that anecdotal moment to inform product, to inform sales, and they think that they might think that it will repeat. But if they
Right.
don't have a third party, an objective third party with experience, showing them the whole landscape, they'll confuse the trees for the forest. Is the right expression in English? Like the tree
Yes.
for the forest, something like that. So yeah, and I think that's something that we both, as Transcendency and Harbinger Lane, can bring to those founders. I mean, it's just just the clarity of what you should do and the speed. Also, because both companies, uh, we keep in touch with the dominant players in the market, the ecosystems like around the LMS, around the SIS, around the CRM, and we understand much better the type of partnerships, the value that those partnerships can bring. So there might be much faster ways to the market, using that broad definition of market, but to the market than just brute force or just an anecdotal situation where these founders might be successful, but it's not scalable, it's not repeatable, right?
Right.
Okay, so we have touched on startups, which is great, and I'm also really passionate about that. Uh, let's go into the scale ups, into the world of scale ups. So what are those typical blind spots, or what are those things uh, where Harbinger Lane can usually brings great value to those companies?
Yeah. Um, yeah. Again, I think in the scale ups that I've worked with or that I am working with, uh, the one thing that I would say is these are companies that have, in a lot of ways, found their rhythm. Uh, they found success, and they're just looking to expand on it. And so, and many times, what's happening is they're coming to me because they've said, we want to. Um, well, I've had clients that were from outside the U.S. who wanted to enter the U.S. market, and they just throw up their hands and they go, I don't get it. It seems like a crazy market, and they want an understanding. And so sometimes we do start with kind of an advising component for those folks. And I shouldn't say just those that are outside of the US, even founders that are within the US that have, let's say that you went to an elite university in California, you developed some really great tech for, for a university like the one you went to in California. And now you're thinking, all right, I need to go scale this across the other 4,000 institutions in the US and higher ed. And so even in those situations, helping them sort of slow down to speed up, let's figure out like what it is that's really done that you've done well. And it looks like to me you've I'm just making this up right now, but you've maybe had success with, a dozen institutions that happen to meet a particular profile. And so now you're saying, help me with the community college market, or help me with large school districts, or whatever. And I think what we have to do first is get really clear on what it's going to mean to move into that next new market in terms of like your timing, right? The period of time it's going to take to close deals in this segment of higher ed versus this segment can be very different, right? So let's first help you decide, do you really want to do that right now? Is that worth the time and effort? Or do you need to go somewhere where you can actually get faster, repeatable sales sooner in your pipeline? And so help them sort of figure out like, why are you, I guess the why is what we have to figure out with the scale up is, why are you taking that next step? And let's just be really super clear together about, what's involved in that area for growth. And one of the things that we did this last year for 2 clients was we ended up doing basically market research. So we called it our buyer's market survey, where effectively we work with the client to understand what's the new part of the market they're trying to get into, help them think through all the potential buyers and areas for funding for that initiative or for that type of product. And then in both cases, we chose a number of prospects that we would go do these surveys. And so Harbinger Lane would go out, and in one case it was completely anonymous. The people we were surveying didn't know the client that we were helping. In the other case, it was okay that we shared that who the client was. But we go in as sort of the neutral third party, establish these buyer surveys, and come back and provide the download on each one, and also sort of a synthesis of the data collected across all of the surveys to inform product development, to inform sales and marketing, and all of the different areas to launch into these new parts of the market. And what was most compelling about those projects for these scale ups is there's a lot of big think tanks that are going to go do this work for you, and they're going to do it over 6 months, and it's going to cost you an ungodly amount of money, and it's going to be amazing data, right? But we just think more practically, we know a scale up is still a version of a startup, and
Yeah.
it's still
With more people, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, with higher risk. And so in those situations, we were able to turn around. In one scenario, we did the work across 10 buyer surveys, and we had all the work done inside of 2 months. In the other situation, they just wanted 5 surveys done, and we had it done inside of 30 days. And so that's the work to identify who you're going to go after, what you're going to talk about, what the survey is going to include. Um, Reaching out to lots of people that meet that sort of ideal buyer persona until you get enough to agree to participate in a 1 hour survey, and
Right.
then you go conduct those surveys, analyze the responses, and provide that back to the company.
Absolutely. And so a couple of things there where I really think again our combined offering will be really helpful. And it's so one is that sometimes I see my clients. Of course, everyone wants the data and everyone wants to, like have facts to base their decisions on or to base their work on. But sometimes when they embark on that type of primary research, they'll ask the wrong people, they'll approach the wrong institutions. Sometimes firms doing that research will go the easiest route for the usual responders or the more active responders rather than the most important responders. And there are lots of again blind spots or pitfalls there. And suddenly you're basing your marketing, your sales, and your efforts in the wrong data, and that can be disastrous. And that's one thing, and the other is that whenever you have data on a particular segment of the market, you identify personas, you get a sense of their journeys. There's another huge pitfall, and it is assuming that you control the buyer journey, that you can actually reach out to people and then persuade them to go through these stages. And the result of that in a mindset, which is an old mindset for marketing, you end up, you end up influencing everyone so in such a perfect manner that they will at some point buy, and that point being more sooner than later. So there's this illusion around how B2E, those B2E buying journeys work. And what I think is valuable, again, from our combined offering is that you having that certainty or having that relying on that data I mean, you don't need to assume that everything works that way. The actual good marketing projects and the good marketing programs work in the sense of building that mental availability that I was alluding to at the beginning of this conversation. It's knowing that you need to be there and you need to build your brand on those personas, on those institutions, and that's gradual. And there are long sales cycles and there are influencers and there's lots of things happening until a buying opportunity presents. And it is very important to be the brand they recall when that happens, but it's not that you necessarily control that buyer journey. There are exceptions, but most often than not, when you're challenging, when you're a challenger in a category, when you're, more often than not, it's you're there. You need to be there as an alternative. You need to be there as on that short list in the minds of your buyers rather than you persuading and convincing everyone, and they'll just instantly change.
So I have to put my sales hat on and say, I mean, because I totally agree with you. I think if I look back at opportunities to do this sort of survey thing, right? You, it was, I worked in both cases, I worked with people from product and sales / marketing from the companies to inform the questionnaire that we were going to use for the survey. But also in both cases, because I've just got a sales background and I know, in this case, higher ed really well, I was able to not only get them information that helped them with sort of the categories of understanding that they wanted to fill, but I also was able to kind of go back and say, hey, look, this one is going to buy from you tomorrow, right? This one is, if this one is basically a thought leader in the space, and I did some research on them, and they were very positive about what you're doing. And if you could get to them, they're going to actually help you cascade your value. Like, so the, the I guess the other piece to it is that when I think about it from, especially from like a marketing standpoint, like there's other sort of anecdotal N of one details that you're pulling out of these interactions that can really form a marketing strategy, um, because we know that it would be amazing if your first beta client for this new service you're offering or this new product you're offering, was a thought leader in the space, right? And that we could get them to not only be a beta client, but we could also get them to be a part of a marketing campaign. Maybe they speak at a conference, and there's different ways that they don't have to. You never ask a client to sell, but asking them to sort of, you know, be an advisor, or asking them to,
some sort of endorsement that can
it can
and
be a
that's very smart because it could also give you a notion of time frames for different segments, if I understand that correctly, because you can also base your marketing efforts, your demand generation efforts, having some notion of those timeframes by segment, and that's a clear roadmap. That's a playbook, right? Like,
right.
and that's where execution in marketing and sales also. Of course, you need to be adaptable, but that's where when you can give marketing and sales clarity on those notions, on those segments, on those timeframes. That's a playbook, right? That's
Yes,
that's something everyone can understand, follow, and have the alignment and consistency that usually drives success, right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You're constantly looking for what will scale, what will be repeatable, in that playbook environment, right? And if we bring that kind of nuanced understanding of the market and of the buyer's journey that we've identified in this process together, it's going to really inform a very authentic campaign, um, for them once they're ready to launch.
So we're missing the established companies, um, and at 27.0, our beginnings were very tied to those established companies rather than the scale ups or startups, and just to change the order of the of our experiences. So for these established companies that maybe are the dominant LMS players, or the, I don't know, the dominant SIS players. So usually what's interesting for them in our experience is them engaging with communities, with it could be user communities, but it could also be influencer communities or type of personas. And what we've historically helped them with, it's either branded content where you can make those personas, instead of observers, you can make them participants, right? Like flipping the script with those things. And I think, yeah, in a nutshell, that's what those big players or established firms really value from 20th Century. So in your case, Darin, can you share, your experience and contribution to those established firms, and how we can work together?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I think a couple of things come to mind. One is that one of the first clients that I brought on, I'm still working with today. I'm happy to mention names here. Beacon Education. They're based out of China, and they're the largest online program uh, provider in China of university graduate programs. And Um, so it's a very well established company. It's been around, I think, since 2017, if I remember correctly. But they've grown massively. They've had wonderful success, um, and the value that I brought them was purely to help them connect to. Um, they knew exactly where they wanted to go. Like they knew exactly which which types of universities would be a fit, what types of programs, and like they wanted to find U.S. institutions to work with to launch their online master's programs in China. And so we just worked together to kind of have a shared understanding of the market. It helps that one of them is actually based in the U.S. They've got a pretty good understanding of the market already. They also know what Chinese working professionals are looking for in terms of online program development opportunities. And um, so for them, it was, and it continues to be me opening doors uh, to deans, to provosts, to presidents, to chancellors at specific types of institutions, and knowing how to have the conversation with those people. So I'm basically a broker in that situation of relationships. Like it's that simple, right?
Okay.
Um,
So
and
opening doors, basically. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, um, and I love it. It's a lot of fun. You get lots of really interesting conversations. Strategic conversations going on at these institutions like that. The thing that I think is probably more appealing to these larger companies is helping with large strategic initiatives. Some companies will go out and hire lobbyists in a bunch of different states, right? And that's smart. Maybe depending on what they're trying to do, um, they need to do that. Um, but you know, when there's a large initiative, I work with now one of my clients is also in California, and we help. We're actually helping companies uh, come to California and work on strategies to get into the CSU system, the UC system, the community college system. Um, and some of that is work with lobbyists that can help from a legislative perspective, because it's a tight economy right now everywhere, and understanding where you can really bring value, and how to find the funding sources to make it worth your time. That's a component. But sometimes it's really working on, this is where I wanted to kind of get your thoughts. It's really working on a statewide strategy to uh, enable a company to more quickly develop that playbook to in a short period of time influence the right people across, I mean, the CSU has 23 institutions, the community college system has 116, right? Like, so it's a lot of institutions, a lot of different leaders, a lot of different people everywhere. Um, I wonder what you think about the idea of taking a really strong understanding and the right people and the right resources to support a company's campaign at a state level, but also enabling it through a more deliberate marketing strategy at the same time in an individual state, or across an individual consortia, for instance.
Right. So in our case, as I was saying, it is usually about that. So engagement marketing gives you an edge in the sense that if you're addressing those communities, those systems, those are tightly knit, type of communities. And whenever you are able to resonate or to have one of those community members work with your brand, it could be endorsement, it could be, I don't know, as simple as a case study or a success story, right? And you have the right branding tools to make everyone not only pay attention to you, but have that kind of peer. I don't know if that's the right expression in English, but it's like that peer-to-peer effect. Like oh, I saw Darin from from this, I don't know, from this institution, and he was featured in this thing, and and it was distributed in such and such way in LinkedIn, for example. I don't know, and then suddenly the other institutions, the other community members want to be there and want to be part of that, and that gives them a platform of credibility, of reputation, and that's a kind of a viral effect. That's what usually has worked with our initiatives that are in that help those established companies. It's that community engagement marketing that to your point, it doesn't work in isolation. You
Right.
can create great rapport with with one particular person and an institution, and make the most out of that in terms of content distribution and channel distribution. But it is essential to have the right PR, to have a sales team that knows how to follow up, right? That knows how to follow through after
Right.
that happens.
Yeah.
And it's yeah. So for in our case, that those engagement marketing activities or initiatives need to be to my initial point. Like, you need to have clarity on what needs to happen before, like where you're coming from, but
Right.
also a follow through. What comes after you're successful with these groups. We have great examples of that with Anthology, for example, one of my dearest clients, on how something like that can happen, and the excuse is a documentary, right? Like you're making a documentary on higher education in Latin America, and it's interesting enough as content, but if you don't have the right program or the right playbook to follow through with that, you'll never get the revenue results that you want. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's again that's why those community type of efforts work so well with established companies.
Yeah. I'm glad you put it in the context of the community effort. It strikes me that what I what I envision for a larger, say, statewide strategy, and where I've been successful in the past. Again, it's always when you do something at large scale, it takes a village, it takes a team coming together, and that's usually sales and marketing. And um, the the thing I always say about the education markets is that you don't sell to them. You're not on the outside selling to the market. You're selling through it, right? You're selling to it by
Exactly.
selling through it, and
Right.
means that means coming in and speaking their language. That means coming in with a common understanding of the problems that they have, not the ones that you've manufactured for them, right? And and all of that context, uh, if it's well placed, then really serves to enable your community strategy you're talking about. I think
Absolutely.
that's so key.
Absolutely. Especially now, and a couple of things I would like to mention, especially now that if you look at higher education, but in general, if you look at the education particularly in the US, there are a lot of opportunities for brands to transform the way they engage. To your point, it's selling through, it's not selling to, because if you sell to, you're not identifying with their daily concerns. You're not identifying with their. I mean, there's a lack of not only clarity, but these are profoundly changing times. Like you cannot count on many of the things that you could count on before, right? And I'm talking about the U.S. government, like, be very specific on that. So there's an opportunity now for brands to react and do the right thing to be more partners with which can sound cliche, but to be more partners than vendors for many of these institutions. That's one thing, and the other is the opening those doors in certain systems in certain states is key, because getting the attention of particular decision makers or influencers in those places is
Right.
costly if you don't have the right help. I mean, you can waste a lot of money in trying to get, and you can even get access to a person, but if you don't have the right advice on what should be the topics of the conversation, what are those pressures that person on the other side is living day by day, you're gonna have the meeting, but you're gonna have, I don't know, I mean, you're gonna waste your time if that's done incorrectly, especially. I want to be very, I want to point that type of founder specifically, especially if you're a technical founder, if you're a technical person who's very proud of your technology, who's very proud of your early success, but
Right.
maybe that will not resonate, that will not, I mean, especially
Right.
in a state like California, where you're so exposed to the latest technology, it's gonna be
Oh yeah.
just another meeting, right? It's, you know, so
Hey,
yeah.
100%. Yeah, and there's the other side of it too, which is that you have, and I've come across some amazing founders that have got some great businesses that are not technical founders. They actually come from the academic space. They were professors and deans um, and uh, heads of enrollment at institutions, and what what they where their kind of blind spot comes into play in this regard, or where they can kind of be off, is that they actually get everybody in a room nodding their heads because they're their peers, and they don't want to. Nobody wants to say, I don't like this idea.
Right. Yeah,
You
people
know,
are usually polite. Yeah, yes.
yeah. So you kind of you can actually have too much really good experience and still have blinders on in terms of what your market has to say, and that's why having kind of the objective third party
View. Right.
view is so critical in both cases.
So this has been a great conversation, Darren. I think we touched on the many of those positive things we can contribute to, and how can we contribute to different stages companies are at, and we gave a lot of examples, and maybe to close, what I would like to say is to our audiences, approach us. We can easily give you notions, like early knowledge about the things that we know. You don't necessarily need to engage with us in a, in a consulting engagement or anything like that. Just test the waters and and see, yeah, how we can make your edtech efforts better. And thank you very much, Darren. I'm really excited about our partnership, and this conversation shows all of those strong points for what we bring to the market.
I totally agree, and I'm looking forward to it. And I think we have the same kind of shared understanding of the markets. We have really the same philosophical approach. So I'm glad to be working with you guys on this. It'll be fun.
Yeah, we are too. Thanks, Darren.
Okay.